It gives me great pleasure to open up the 816th round, 816 of our Lifestyle and Community Committee. Councillor Castro is joining us today. Good to have you back. Good to have you back. We've got our Deputy Chair, Councillor RBL. Still can't pronounce your name fluently. Very good to have you here.
Work your way from there.
Our Acting Mayor, Councillor Donna Gates.
Thank you.
Good to have you here.
Nice to be
Yes.
here.
Wonderful. So, councillors, let's make good use of the valuable city officer time that we have in the
entire
rooms
department.
behind us by progressing
directorate.
swiftly through our agenda. We do have the whole directorate here. Councillors, we have a number of items today, some of which are unstarred, which could potentially be dealt with as starred items. I would suggest that 7.2 and 7.1 be starred, unless there are any questions on those. 7.2 deals with our... I don't know why I can't pronounce anything today. Trees. Our tree services and how we want to hug them and look after them. Yeah. So that's 7.2, 7.1 I propose starring. 6.1, 5.1 are starred. Biosecurity program is of intense interest to me, but I don't think is very controversial. So maybe 6.4 can be dealt with as a starred item. On that item? Okay, no worries. So we'll scratch that out. Diamond Sports Plan councillors, happy to star that. Okay. And Oxenford Pony Club.
Sorry, did you say star it?
Star it.
I think we might not star that one.
That's fine.
Is that right?
Yeah, happy days. And Oxenford Pony Club relocation? Proposed. Okay. All right, councillors, let's just go through that then quickly. 5.1 will be starred, 6.1 starred, 7.1 starred and 7.2 starred. Is that correct? Any general business items proposed, councillors? We have one by Councillor Owen Jones.
Might end up just being a question.
Okay, put that down as potential question or GBI. Beautiful. All right, attendance and apologies. Councillors, do we have any apologies? No, don't believe so. I've not received any. Any leaves of absence? No. Confirmation of minutes. Would someone like to move that our minutes? Councillor Gates, seconded by Councillor Tozer. Any speakers against? No. Happy to put that then. All those in favour? All those against? That is carried. All right. Councillors, any conflict of interest declarations to make today? No. Happy days. We can move along then. Would someone like to move our starred items today? Councillor Tozer, do I have a seconder? Councillor Gates. Councillors, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? That is carried. We now move to item 6.2, which deals with the Diamond Sports Plan. Bruce is at the ready. It's good. Councillor Caldwell, you indicated, I think, a desire to ask some questions.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Bruce, so have we sent a final version of this to the stakeholders?
Through the Chair, no, a final report has not been sent out to them, but they are aware of the contents of it.
So do you think it would be maybe useful if we do that between now and full council or something? Because if we adopt it and then they find something in the plan that they don't like or suggest that we change, it's kind of too late. Is that right?
Through the Chair, it's a guiding document, so it can be changed at any time anyway. But yeah, the point, I guess, to this stage is that the associations, respectively, softball and baseball, have indicated, based on their viewing of it, that the clubs are happy with it. So it hasn't been sent out yet, but I don't expect there to be any adverse impact or changes to the report. And the plan really is confirmation of the strategic plans of both softball and baseball and what they've provided details through the consultation process. So I don't expect any issues.
So, Councillor Caldwell, I propose starring the item today, not because I necessarily support the recommendations, but what I personally wanted to do for my community was to take a copy of the report and provide it to my local club so that they could be very familiar with its contents and provide me with the guidance I might need at full council to either support the committee recommendation or perhaps to argue for change. But I didn't want to personally prejudice that, but I've got very similar reservations.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. I might do something similar, only because I just want to make sure we close the loop on what has been a very consultative process. So I think I might just take that opportunity as well, if that's all right.
Councillor Tozer, just before we come to you, Director, would it be possible to get a PDF version of that item, that report only, and circulate it to perhaps all committee members today and to those councillors who are not committee members but have clubs? And then I think it's incumbent on us, if we want to work with our clubs, to put that under their noses, and then we can be sure that that's been done between now and full council. Councillor Tozer, and I'm not providing you direction, by the way, I'm merely asking a question as per the acceptable request guidelines.
Absolutely, I can send that out today. Thanks, Councillor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Tozer.
Page 36 talks about the size of each club and its growth since 2012. My question relates to whether this information is provided by the clubs themselves or whether it's by the membership of a peak body.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the information in the report comes directly from the registration figures at Baseball Queensland.
Right.
So they're the figures we're based on. Those figures do vary slightly to what the clubs have provided, but
Yes.
the explanation given for that was that they have winter and summer competitions for their seniors, and some people have been counted twice in the club figures.
Right. I think in knowing Mudgeeraba pretty well, they've obviously got T-ball programs and they've got entry-level programs where I don't imagine every parent would necessarily make sure their child was a member of Baseball Queensland's peak body. And so I'm just... So do we have the data from clubs or do we only have the peak bodies or Baseball Queensland's membership?
Through the Chair, we have both.
Right.
But the registration figures that go in are for T-ball, juniors, seniors.
How does through the chair, how does the registration process work for a baseball or a diamond sports family in the city?
Through the Chair,
So who do you join? How do they join and how does that membership work?
it's an online process. So they go online and register, and it's automated system through to Baseball Queensland, as with most sports in the current day.
Yeah, so I mean, when I'm a member of Gold Coast Basketball and I pay a fee to the local club, but there's also a portion of that fee that is some affiliation fee with Basketball Queensland. Is that the same model with baseball?
Yes, very similar.
And then if the club chooses to engage in programming with, let's say, juniors, in my area, we've got lots of primary schools and they run programs like that where there is just like kind of a loose connection to the club as opposed maybe not to Baseball Queensland. Is that incorporated into our planning or understanding?
Through the Chair, they would not be in the figures.
No, okay, cool. All right.
So, Councillor Tozer, I think some of my concern over a number of years on our approach to baseball is that, for example, Robina is now the city's third largest club.
Yeah.
Right? They have lots of social programs that are not necessarily membership driven. I think they might take care of insurance through another channel. They're not capturing those. There are lots of university students
Yes.
who use the facility as well. Well, I should put a big asterisk on that and say when we had international students. Obviously, for the last 2 years, they've been thin on the ground. But that's the third largest club, and they don't have a toilet and they really don't have change rooms. So in a lot of ways, I think the figures are what the figures are. They're our best approximation, but they're very fuzzy, and they probably don't have much regard, or they don't reflect what numbers could be if we had good infrastructure in place. That's why I've been keen to go through this process, make sure that we've captured the aspirations of our clubs and understand where the pinch points are with membership. Because it could be a low membership sport, but maybe that's because we don't have the infrastructure there in the same way we do for cricket or for soccer, for example. So I've more looked at this sport from an aspirational perspective rather than a currency perspective. Councillor Young. Oh, sorry, Glenn, do you have more questions on it?
I had one other question that related to the use of our facilities by, so in Mudgeeraba on a relatively regular basis, because it's a lit field, we have Brisbane sides that come down and play. They're not. It's not the local club playing in Mudgeeraba, and I'm not across everything that happens in baseball, but my understanding is there's both an economic impact, but there's also a club impact on that. That's actually a really good generator. To what extent does the plan address that sort of activity?
Through the Chair, Mudgeeraba teams play in a Brisbane competition. That's why Brisbane teams visit the site.
Again, my observation is that sometimes at Mudgeeraba there are two clubs playing that are not Mudgeeraba, and there's an economic impact on that, and there's also a club growth impact on that, even though a Mudgeeraba club isn't playing on that day. Is that something we are targeting as part of the plan? Do we want that to happen or not? It doesn't seem to be addressed in the plan. I'm not sure if it should be part of the plan.
I'm not aware of other clubs playing there. Certainly the clubs haven't brought that to my attention or officer attention.
Okay, cool.
So before we come to you, Councillor Young, just on that, Councillor, for me, baseball is a massive economic opportunity because the sport is just so very popular in key destinations where we hope to attract international students.
Agreed.
Taiwanese, Korea, Japan, even the United States. They're baseball mad. To the extent that a Japanese national who's a Gold Coast resident, or he might be from Brisbane, he recently invested in Robina State High, I think about $400,000, building a brand new baseball diamond for them, because that's how strong the links are internationally through the sport to the Gold Coast. So that's such a great opportunity to support the sport that's bringing in international students. But what's really encouraging, I think you'd agree with the Robina State High Sports Academy, is that a lot of Gold Coast kids playing baseball here have gone on to get US college scholarships, free rides. So I think the link between education and baseball is definitely there. 100%. It's got an economic complexion to it, but I think this plan really focuses more on the grassroots sport rather than the economic case.
Got it.
And that's something I'm keen to see addressed in the infrastructure plan. Councillor Young.
Thanks, Chair, and either to yourself or through to the Director. I just note in the report there, and I think it's like 3 or 4 of them have no field lighting, and they're surrounded by residential development and have had a history of objections from the residents. So, and one of those being Surface, so being nominated as that central hub. How are we going to address that? Because that's not going to change. We're not going to change the residential use within the areas. So I would imagine if we're going to be doing improvements that you would want them to be available more than just daylight hours. So how are we going to overcome that hurdle that's obviously identified here in quite a few places in the report?
Through Chair, the councillor's comment is noted. That has been discussed with the Surfers Paradise Club as well as the association. They are currently looking at the feasibility of putting an application for their second diamond, which is further away from the residential development, which may resolve the issue of lighting at that particular site. If you note in the actions, short-term actions that we're looking at, it's looking at the feasibility of some of the sites, including Coomera, including Surfers Paradise, where there are potential issues with residential development to see whether they can or cannot progress.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, please.
And back through yourself to Bruce, is that are we better to be looking at what the impact is going to be before we actually start planning for second diamonds and things like that? Because the lighting thing is, well, I've noticed with a couple of my clubs, is a big issue at times. So, and knowing the cost of lighting is, going forward, we need to know that, and especially as Councillor Forster said, if we're going to look at international attendance at these, lighting's going to be a big thing. So for me, I think that would be something that needs to be looked at fairly soon, rather than increasing these wonderful facilities and investing a lot of ratepayers' money into them to find that we can't light them.
Through the Chair, I totally agree. And that was one of the chief reasons why this plan was brought about in the first place, was to look exactly at that. We had a mere 2 years ago 7 baseball clubs coming at us concurrently through the councillors or the council directly for infrastructure improvements to all get to the same level. What this process has achieved is baseball coming to the conclusion that they do have underutilised facilities, they do have constraints over existing sites, and they've come up with a new model, and it's in the plan, suggested a 3-hub, north, central, south, to transition to over the next 3 to 5 years, and also the longer term goal of perhaps a facility in the north. Now, a facility in the north, whereas there's reasons for that, maybe not now, given the participation that exists in the sport, but as Councillor Forster alluded to, the economic benefits of a facility where we could invest in the future. We've got there's nothing north of Coomera at the present time, and we've got a large population growth projections north to Logan and east and west of the M1, and sites like Coomera won't be able to handle that increased population. So, whereas it's not a consideration right here, right now, it's certainly there's certainly reasons to look at potential sites or rationalisation of sites, centralisation of sites into the future, and none of that's been left out of the plan. It's very generic. It doesn't have specific details, with the exception of things that are underway at the present time. You've got the Firth Park Master Plan, you've got the Robina Common Improvement Plan, but outside that, it's very generic in the context. But we're no longer in a position, and baseball has recognised, they don't need to improve or develop each site to the optimum level.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Forster. And that brings me to the other thing that I was going to ask. For example, and sorry, through the chair, through to Bruce, is I can remember similar conversations when I first became a councillor about hockey, because hockey was in the southern Gold Coast, central, all that. We went through our Commonwealth Games, and now we've got, world-class hockey facility there. But we haven't provided lots of little pockets around the city for that. Again, the same thing's happening with netball. We've got at Malawa, we've got, I think it's 21 netball sites there. We've got it out at Firth Park, and then we've got little pockets, and I can speak from experience at Pizzey, where we've got 2 or 3 training surfaces, but there's no games or anything played there. I think the direction, it appears to be the direction we're heading, is to have these big hubs going forward. So I just wonder, with 7 smaller hubs identified there, are we better to be looking at your northern, southern and central and have really good sites? Because with 7 sites there, is it something that they can be looked at together? Just for value for money, to have really good sites. Yeah.
So, Councillor Young, before Bruce responds, one of the encouraging things that have come out of my discussions with my local baseball club, who have reflected on what's happened at Robina State High, is that there is a way of configuring a training grade diamond where you actually get 2 bites at the cherry, because you don't necessarily need the fencing in the outfield, and that can be effectively bumped in. So when the field's not being used by the sport of baseball, that fencing can be removed, and soccer can use the space.
Bit
So-
like AFL and that, yeah.
Sorry.
A bit like AFL and that
Yeah,
as well at one of the other
so,
clubs.
so you can get reasonably good dual purpose outcomes as well. So I think there's certainly a case to be made for better use of these pockets
Yes, most definitely.
while
yeah.
preserving some element of training games. Bruce?
And through the chair, that's exactly the intent of this plan, to go down that track. There is no evidence to suggest that each site has to be developed to a certain level, and if baseball go down the track of 3 hubs, then the other 4 sites will be transitioned into training facilities, so juniors in particular don't have to travel large distances to play the sport of choice, but they've still got the facilities there to be able to do so. And less infrastructure means sites that were previously unable to be utilised by other recreational or sporting outcomes can be used in the future.
Councillor Owen-Jones?
I just want to thank Bruce for the work on this. It's always difficult, and I think that the Coomera Cubs is probably one of those clubs that has provided that pressure of, can we spend more capital doing something? So in the last couple of years, we've built a new clubhouse, which provides all of the amenity that you were lacking at Robina, but they've got a never-ending quest to spend money on the site, and so I think getting up and looking to see what it means for the whole of the city actually does make sense, because otherwise they'll forever be asking for the $400,000 worth of lights or the grandstands or this and that. So I think that it's a body of work that needed to be done, but when we had the workshop, I wasn't able to attend because it clashed with the committee. So having the benefit of being able to go and talk to the president of the club between now and council definitely will help.
Thanks for unstarring that item, Councillor Caldwell, and thank you for your questions, Councillor Yeo.
Absolutely happy to identify issues that are very important across the whole of the city to flesh out positive discussion.
We'll see that on a social media tile in a moment. Moved by Councillor Tozer.
We might be able to get some federal funding for baseball.
Yeah, classic. It'll be more like a swing and a miss. Hey. By the way, best ever Simpsons episode, Homer and the Bat. Homer and the Bat. Yes, Homer and the Bat, season 2, when he plays for the Springfield Isotopes, and then Burns brings in all these ringers. Yeah, definitely worth watching. So that's moved by Councillor Tozer. Do I have a seconder? Councillor O'Neill. Councillors, any speakers against? No, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? That is carried. And Director, just a gentle reminder around a PDF copy of the report. And thanks, Bruce, for your contribution, mate. Wonderful. All right, councillors, we now deal with the Oxenford Pony Club relocation. Councillor Gates, you foreshadowed a changed recommendation.
Yes, I have, thank you, Chairman. And just to speak briefly to it, the minutes
Before we do that,
that's not
are those
the
your
new one.
updated words on the screen?
Sorry. No, number 2. Number 2, it's wrong way round, Ali, if you can fix it. Yeah, number 2 should say by 2024. By 2024. And yes, 3. Who's got? I heard you on the radio with some quips yesterday. Enough. Yeah, the only difference was that I had number 5 as number 4 and number 4 as number 5, just because I thought it tied in more neatly with number 3. That number 5 followed number, yeah.
See, not many people know that pony and hat go together. No, it's not common knowledge.
Yeah.
Can you rein in the
And
jokes?
and if I can just yes, he's not on the committee, are you?
Not on the committee.
He's not on the committee.
That's moved by Councillor Gates, seconded by Councillor Tozer. And Councillor Gates, please.
Oh, thank
us
you.
in.
Look, there's not any need to really go into great detail. I'm hopeful that the officers can accept that this change has been made because of the problems that the Oxenford Pony Club has with erosion. And they lost another 8 metres of their land in the latest weather event. And so it actually suggests killing two birds with one stone, because we also need to relocate the Oxenford men's shed, who have been promised a building over some time by both the mayor and with the support of the divisional councillor. And the issues associated with their site continue, and this is an opportunity for them to have a home that's suitable to their needs without council spending $1 million on a men's shed. So the fact is that there is land available that has been identified as being suitable to the Pony Club's needs at Enkelman Farm. And I know that the report suggested relocation by 2025 at the expiration of the lease, but it's probably just slightly more urgent than that, which is the motivation for the change today. As far as the Coomera Valley Rotary Club, which is the item 6 of the recommendation, they have received $35,000 in grant funding, which they've already had a couple of extensions of time on because they've not been able to find a location for a storage facility. The Charlie's Crossing site, if the Pony Club agrees to it, would be ideal because it's completely screened. It would not need to be visible from any point on the site at a location that could be identified behind the existing infrastructure. So this deals with 3 issues in the one hit if the committee supports it.
Any speakers against ponies? Councillor Caldwell,
Not a speaker against, just a comment, and that is...
you're going to speak to it.
I'm going to speak to it in the fashion of Councillor Owen Jones. I just wanted to mention that I was in a meeting yesterday where one of the takeouts from the Brisbane floods was the surprising amount of shipping containers that made their way down the floodplain and did an extraordinary amount of damage to their city assets. And I just thought it might be worthwhile that we particularly take note of that, that if it is, I don't know what they had in mind, but
They have $35,000 to spend on a shed.
Yeah, and that's good. I just thought it was worthwhile mentioning because my comment to that was, well, as a general rule, we really try not to support shipping containers being used on council leased areas anyway. But just in this kind of site, for example, it's very important that we know the potential flood damage that can be caused. So if we can make sure that's covered off, I think it'd be good.
This will be a beautiful shed, not a shipping container.
Beautiful.
So I don't need to say any more.
Councillor Owen Jones.
If I could speak to it, thank you, Chair. Having previously represented this area,
As the former councillor or the former councillor?
one of the important things to note is that the erosion of that bank isn't anywhere near any existing houses. So on page 60, you can actually see the houses. There's quite some distance. The erosion has happened over the last 60 years, and it's largely caused because of the changes to the river from the mining of sand and rock downstream, and that's stopped. And at some point in time, it will sort itself out. But the idea of spending over $5 million to armour the northern side of the Coomera River is the challenge that we have is that we don't know what impact that may have on the southern side, which is where the main road for the Maudslin Road is. So it's quite complicated. I'm no engineer, but I think that the only way we can stop nature would be an incredibly expensive exercise of armouring, and I think that what will happen will continue to happen on that edge of the bank. But I think it's really important that the residents in that estate know that their houses aren't at risk of erosion. And I think that it's important that we provide an outcome for the Pony Club, because they were moved from the original Oxenford site in 2011-12, and they really do need a good outcome.
And speaking of eroding the bank, this is a much better value for money outcome? Given the fact that the report talks of some $7 million, I reckon that it certainly is. I don't think anybody gets any joy in the fact that a park is being partly eroded, but it's clearly an issue that when the John Muntz Bridge when the John Muntz Causeway was removed and replaced by not one but two John Muntz bridges, that effectively accelerated the water in storm events, and it's just sucking the edge of the bank away. So if TMR want to invest to make sure that their asset is protected, I would encourage them to continue to do that. But I just can't see how it makes sense for the city to spend $5 or $7 million on armour. Yeah, we're talking to the wrong main roads. Councillor Hamill.
Mr. Chair, just to pick up on a comment you made about value for money, for me, point 3 in this recommendation talks a lot to that. That's similar to what we just discussed in the report about the Diamond Sport plan, that a similar kind of report and similar kind of plan for equestrian is needed, because while we won't have to spend the money on armouring Charlie's Creek, there was a significant amount of money spent buying a Goodman Farm in the first place and making sure it gets high utilisation, which only having one club go there won't achieve. So we'll see what point 3 comes from. And hopefully that would lead to that value for money proposition occurring.
Yep. Happy days. Councillors, any speakers against? I'll happy to put that to a vote. You would like to close? Yeah, sure.
Gold Coast, so there's certainly no intent for it to simply be the site for equestrian and the Oxenford Pony Club, but for multiple uses. It's quite flood affected in some places too, but I'm sure that the officers will come up with a great plan. And I was going to mention that the whole report is much more than just the Oxenford Pony Club relocation. It is about equestrian and the 13 clubs that we do have on the Gold Coast, and the need for them after being displaced so many years ago, and our hunt for a site. So I'm sure that the planning work that will evolve will make sure that a lot of the clubs across the city are catered for, both in equestrian and other sports as well.
Yeah. Councillors, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? The nays have it.
But they don't. It was the yays. The nays lost.
The yays have it.
So good. Councillors, we now have item 6.4 dealing with our biosecurity programs. Councillor Tozer, I understand you had a question. We might give Ian a moment to join us in the chamber. Oh, we've got the whole team. Oh dear.
It's funny. We're only surveilling deer in this report.
Ah.
We're on camera.
So we had, I was just... Councillor Tozer, question?
So my question is actually, I've been engaging with the team in relation to the National Feral Deer Program, and I wanted to be assured that there's nothing in our plan here, or the biosecurity plan we put here, that prevents us from engaging with other third parties in order to deal with pests outside city land, or enabling residents to manage their own obligations under the Biosecurity Act.
That's correct. There's nothing in here to prevent that.
Great. So part two of my question actually relates to the European fox, which is identified in the prevention and control of invasive plants and animals, and it identifies a number of suburbs where we're dealing with foxes. I'm talking on page 10 of 11 in the report, which is page 111 of the agenda, and it identifies only a few suburbs where we're controlling European foxes, and I'm a bit sceptical that the foxes will read the report. So maybe through the chair to Ian, help me understand how we're going to encourage the foxes to read the report so they stay in those suburbs.
Have you ever watched The Fantastic Mr. Fox or read the book?
Yes.
He's a wily sort.
Foxes are fantastic, and there's quite a few of them out our way. So,
Ian?
Through the chair, and apologies, said before. Foxes don't read reports, but lucky the councillors do.
That's a revelation.
They actually get their news from Fox News.
Pardon, lovely. At least it's not rabbit jokes this week.
Hey,
so
I'm not on the board
Now
anymore.
we're
I don't
just
have to
splitting
feel like
hairs.
So it's a resourcing dilemma. Council's resource with 4 pest animal staff. We're managing 16,000 hectares of natural areas for pest animals. And we're also given a responsibility under the Biosecurity Act to manage those or ensure landholders outside of council land or manage pest animals. So we've made a decision based on the risk that foxes pose to koalas. You'll see from our previous program last year, we targeted the koala conservation areas in the north of the city and the central areas around the Coomera wetlands. This year we're moving to the southern areas and protecting koala populations in the south.
Yeah, so I think thanks to that contribution, and maybe it was all by pure accident, but I think that's a worthwhile conversation for us to be having during budget around resourcing, because it's one thing to have a plan, but the rubber has to meet the road as well. Councillor Tozer.
So it's proposed that this plan be our actions for the coming 12 months, and then in 12 months' time we'll have another plan that might identify new suburbs. But for the coming 12-month season, these suburbs identified on page 111 are the suburbs we're going to most... Yeah, can you help me just flesh that out for me? Well, how does it work when you get a report of a fox in Talai or in Benogan or in Arundel for that matter? Where to from here?
So these are, let's call them proactive programs, where scheduling works 12 months out to coincide with fox breeding season. If we get reports about chickens being taken or fox impacts in any suburb of the city, we do respond to those as our resources permit.
So there'll still be a reactive program.
Correct. Yes,
that's good news.
part.
Yeah, and I suppose I'm conscious that that's what came to mind. The reality is that most of our agricultural landholders, who are the most significant economic impact from foxes, are further west. And I know that there are a lot in the suburbs of, perhaps Tallabudra and Tallabudra Valley. There's some agricultural landholders there. But I think we as a city need to make sure that we're not just addressing foxes as a pest for my pet chicken, but actually for, attacking baby lambs out in sheep grazing areas in the back of Gilston. Yeah,
Can they take out the feral deer? Can we train them?
The point I'm trying to make is that making sure that our proactive programs are actually addressing the impact on agricultural landholders are more important than us preventing sad kids losing a chicken in the backyard. That should be we should be focused on that as well. So I'm conscious that we appear to be doing that, and that's great. So we'll rotate it as it happens. I did have some other questions about the surveillance. What is the surveillance plan? What does that mean? When you say surveillance, what does that mean for us?
So through the chair, it's checking properties to ensure they're meeting their obligations under the Act.
So door knocking or? And I get that. I'm trying to understand, because there's lots of people out our way who are going to ask questions about a surveillance program for pest animals and pest plants. What does that mean exactly?
And it's a combination of proactive and reactive programs.
Yep.
We have proactive programs for specific species where we will target known or properties known to previously have or adjoining owners that are likely to have that pest species.
Yep.
But we'll also undertake, I guess, broader surveys like an aerial survey for groundsel bush and water weeds. We'll then use that information to design further ground inspections to make sure that we've identified the correct plants from the air.
Yeah, and so that data is used by us to effectively build a case for greater resourcing of eradication. Am I reading that correctly? So the idea of just seeing where all the groundsel is, or seeing where all the giant rat-tailed grass is, or seeing where all the giant devil's fig is, it's all very good, but unless we're actually seen to be doing something about it, some people from the community might think we're just wasting our time. How would you respond to that?
Through the chair, we have to make hard decisions on where we do the work. We can't eradicate things. Eradicate is a very difficult thing to achieve. We know that from whether you're trying to get nutgrass out of your lawn or whether you're actually trying to remove foxes from a conservation park. So we have to make really hard decisions about where those resources are spent to achieve the best outcomes for the city, and I think we do that very well through the biosecurity plan and the prioritisation that we've set aside there.
So to what extent then is your eradication program underfunded with declared pests?
Councillor Tozer, I don't want to put city officers in a difficult position.
No.
And I'd probably say that question may strain to our budget deliberations, as I kind of foreshadowed. Very happy to hear that response, but I think it's most appropriate perhaps enclosed, because it would have an impact on our budget if there were an appetite to increase funding. So
maybe I could be more vague with my question.
No, I'm happy to receive the answer, because I'm all for a robust surveillance and enforcement program. So if you'd like to move us into close, I'm happy to second it, and we can get some.
Can I ask the question more vaguely so we don't have to move to close?
Yeah, well, let's hear the question. Yep.
So I think what I'm trying to work out is, as I look at the surveillance program, there's a long list of weeds, and as I look at the action program, there is a less long list of weeds, and it occurs to me that the way you've answered the previous question was that you have to make tough decisions about the most important weeds and animals to work on under the Biosecurity Act. Maybe rather than individual figures, I appreciate it's difficult on the spot to come up with a figure that you need, but to what extent are we, maybe not underfunding, are we under generally resourcing the difference between the surveillance list and the action list?
Do you want to take that on notice? I'll take that on notice, and perhaps a memo can be circulated.
That'd be great
to us.
And I think it's important for our special budget committee to understand better the difference between the two lists that you've provided in open session today.
Director and then Councillor O'Neill.
Yeah. So through the chair, what I'm planning on doing before budget is giving a bit of an overview on regulation generally in terms of the funding, because obviously whether it's biosecurity, whether it's the animal management in terms of the fines there, whether it's parking, whether it's local laws, there's obviously a prioritisation. It's the feedback I get the most this year in terms of, you know, why aren't the local law officers up here or down there? Why aren't the PSLOs up here or down there? And I mean in a good way, like it's in we always are prioritising. So it would be good to show you what we've got across the board and how we prioritise that before budget. I don't think we're probably going to move many mountains in budget in terms of that regulation money, but I'd at least show you the kind of resources we've got to cover the city before budget anyway.
Yeah, my point is that in open session, the public are going to be able to read the work on the surveillance and the work on action. They're going to see that difference, and they're expecting an area like mine, which is the largest land mass amongst divisions, to say, well, help me understand, Glenn, what you're doing. Councillor Tozer, what are you doing to actually bridge the gap between the weeds that you're looking at and the weeds that you're actually eradicating? I'm not trying to move us into close intentionally.
As I said, Councillor Tozer, I'm very eager to get an answer to that question. I just didn't want to prejudice our budget deliberations. So I thought at this early point, if there was an answer, we could hear it enclosed.
Yep.
And then interrogate it during budget, because I'm all for surveillance.
On notice through a briefing note would be great.
Yeah. Councillor O'Neill.
Thanks, Chair. And yeah, just a couple of points that Councillor Tozer made. The eradication of, say, for instance, Devil's Fig. I mean, the extent of Devil's Fig in Talbudgera Valley, for instance, and I know you've done some specific work out there, but it's huge. I mean, it's you know, how long's a piece of string? That's really the thing. So I appreciate what you're saying. You do have to prioritise. My questions, you touched on it a little bit, Councillor Tozer, about feral deer. To save just fast track a CR I've got in, does Division 14 have a problem with feral deer?
Not a bigger problem as some of the other divisions in the city. Our numbers are starting to emerge in Division 14. So we are starting to see deer for the first time in Division 14.
Okay. Have you had any complaints from property owners about feral deer? Because I haven't. That's probably what my CR consisted of.
Through the chair. I'd have to take that on notice. I don't have that information to hand right now.
Yeah, Councillor Tozer's hanging on this answer.
Because residents are crying foul.
I mean, I can address I can't answer the question, but I can say that I'm trying to work with the federal government program to assist private property owners meeting their own obligations on their land. I believe that the council officers are doing everything in their power to manage feral deer issues on council land, but like I alluded to with the European fox, unfortunately the deer aren't reading the reports, and they're moving between private land and public land, and one way for us to work more collaboratively is to help private property owners. And I've posed to a number of hinterland councillors a local area works funded program in partnership with the federal government to help deal with feral deer awareness. They're not Bambi-like creatures. They are a significant risk to vehicle strikes, and they're a significant environmental risk. And
it's worth a shot.
It is yes, Councillor Forster. So I haven't excluded any councillors intentionally, but I have circulated a request for local AeroX funded program in consultation with officers for next year, which is being considered by some councillors.
It's the federal deer program. It's good. Look, I've just got a question. I'm going to start off my question by just heaping praise on the city officers who are responsible for this report and the work on the ground. As Councillor O'Neill suggested, there are enormous biosecurity challenges across the city, enormous biosecurity challenges. And like you can't hold back whatever water body it is causing damage at the Pony Club, the Coomera River, you can't hold that back. Sometimes dealing with these biosecurity risks is like trying to hold back the force of nature. It's all but impossible. But residents need to have confidence that we're doing what we can, responding to their complaints, and it's our city officers on the front line doing that work. I think the general disposition of the committee is that we want to make sure city officers are as resourced as reasonably and as highly as possible to carry on that work, because they can have huge impact on the ground, protecting the enjoyment of our open space, but also private property. So I just want to thank city officers for that, and also want to thank them for the very scientific and evidence-based approach that they take, and their risk-based approach to carrying out their duties, because they've got to make the best use of scarce resources, and they're good custodians of ratepayer money. So, Director, through you, to all city officers involved in that team, I just want to underscore that point. I had a question on page 117 about the authorisation of a surveillance program. It's heading 3. Yeah, 117 of the agenda. I just wanted to get clarity about whether a surveillance program can be instantiated by city officers in response to an issue, or does it require a council resolution? And I ask that because underneath the third bullet point, it says here, as passed by council resolution, enter resolution number. So, for example, I have a number of private water bodies in Robina. Okay, so you're going to, it's like a cart before the horse thing. Okay. Thanks, Glenn, for answering that. So for example, I've got a number of private water bodies in Robina that look like public lakes, and they're filled with sylvinia, right? The private landowner has got an obligation to address their biosecurity obligations, their GBOs, under the Act. It's taken me a long while to get to the point where city officers have agreed to carry out some proactive and scheduled inspections of these private water bodies in order to enforce some of these GBOs on the private landowners. If I've got a similar situation to that elsewhere in my division, should I ask for a formal surveillance program to be established in order to manage that risk in that situation? Or is it best for me to progress my request through a CR to ensure that it gets done and that there's a public record of our activities in that space?
Through the chair, I think a CR would be the best for a specific situation like that. This resolution here today is about giving city officers those entry powers to go onto private land, which we wouldn't otherwise have.
Okay.
But if you've got a specific concern that you want to raise with a particular private body of water, as you've just outlined, through that process we can, or through other an engagement, we can certainly look at surveillance.
So I think that's clarified my understanding of the section, because based on your response there, a surveillance program is tied to a particular biosecurity risk rather than a specific incidence or case. If it's a specific case, we raise a CR to take advantage of an existing surveillance program to manage a risk about a specific invasive pest. Yeah, okay, great.
Yes, Chair.
Councillor Arbiel?
Thanks, Chair. Just had two questions on the surveillance. So how does the surveillance influence our programs in terms of what was listed before and the suburbs that were excluded, as Councillor Tozer mentioned? If we have areas that we do survey, like the Arundel Coomera wetlands, we have wildlife cameras through there. If they record more instances of feral animals, how are they then incorporated into the program?
Through the chair, so the programs are for private land, allow us to enter private land. The programs that we undertake on public land or council managed lands are continuing. So they're on I think it's like a 4-month roster of looking at those images, seeing where the pests are, and then implementing controls as required.
Okay. And following on from the memo that Councillor Tozer asked for in, I guess, the budget request, will that also include maybe shortfalls or ways we can improve service in those public land areas? Because I think it is a great service the city does, and I do appreciate that it is under-resourced.
So through the chair, so what I plan to provide you is what we've got now.
Okay.
I think that what we could have in the future is a never-ending request, so I probably won't provide that, but I'm happy to talk to it, the memo, when it comes out.
Okay.
And really what that looks and smells like to me is effectively a small targeted base budget review of this particular section, because during our budget process we look at new and growth proposals, but we probably haven't had regard to our BAU work being spread across a growing city. Yep. Any speakers against? No? Happy to close that then. Councillors, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? All those against? That is carried. Councillors, that brings us to the end of the formal agenda. Councillor Owen Jones, I understand you had a question.
It's in
about some
regards
roundabouts.
swings,
What you went on the swings, you lose on the roundabout.
I went on the swing.
or tried to go on the swing. So I don't know whether or not other councillors have had the issue, but some of the swing settings are quite high and can be difficult for young people to reach the swings, and also difficult for acting mayors to reach the swings. And my understanding is that there's an Australian standard, which is 400 mil of sweep, and we have all of our swings set at 550, and I'm just interested in how we've arrived there because we've had numerous complaints in regards to it.
So I've certainly noticed that in my division, but I think the Australian standard says no lower than 400. If you could talk to that.
Yeah, through the chair, that's correct. There's no maximum standard, just a minimum standard. So it's a minimum of 400. What our city officers try and do to alleviate the sagging of the swings over time, that they set them a bit higher than 400, so around that 500, 550 millimetres. Also, sometimes those swings, depending on what the soft fall material is, can be made up of Takura bark. So often the kids like kicking away the soft fall, which means that the actual height of the swing may seem higher. We do have fortnightly inspections of our playgrounds, though, that address that issue, but certainly 400 is the minimum, and we find that 500, 550 is, from a maintenance perspective, works well throughout the city.
Councillor Owen-Jones, I mean, you've asked a question. Would you support some form of trial of lower seats at particular
I'm happy
parks?
to identify them in our parks, but I could assume that if we have the problem in the north, it's probably everywhere. So we've got one park in particular at Eileen, in Monterey Keys Drive, which is quite high, and we've had a resident complain several times in that regard. So we've had it lowered, but I appreciate the soft fall answer, but I just don't know how a swing sags.
So, Director, again, without providing you direction whatsoever, but merely seeking some information or advice, would you be, perhaps at the same time that you circulate that other memo, invite councillors to nominate particular parks where we might have an issue with higher swings, and perhaps invite city officers to review the height of those swings, because we want to look after our swing voters?
Oh, nicely played.
See what I did there?
I think what we're trying to do is not have them all at 400. So if there's an issue that they're going lower than the standard, then we have to then continually maintain them. We're happy to lower the ones that are too high, but we want to be a bit mindful that we don't want to do that to all of them, or we're going to have a huge maintenance issue on our hands.
Yep, that sounds reasonable to me. Councillor Gates?
Excuse me, Chairman. I did issue a CR just earlier in the month, actually, or last month, because I had difficulty getting on a swing in a playground just when I was doing an inspection of the park. So I asked my officers to take a photo so that I could get a response. And I got exactly the response that's been given today. But, it's really, they just seem way too high at 550, if that's what they are. And it might be that where bigger kids' feet do scoop out and you get that lowering, it seems even much deeper than that. But it's probably not apparent to tall people, but it's really apparent to little people.
How many are the tall?
No, so I mean, I just think
it's called tall poly syndrome.
Yeah, if it's
Tall poly.
well, I sure don't have that. I got the short poly syndrome. So I don't know what the answer is, but
lower swings.
You have to lift a child onto those swings. There's no way that a child can get onto those swings themselves. So is that really the intent when you take a child to the park, that you have to lift them onto the swing?
I've got to still, mine at the age where I've still got to push them, so I've got no choice.
Can yours get on the swings?
Sorry?
Can yours get on the swings?
My eldest can definitely, but my two youngest I pop on anyway. Just because, especially the youngest, I need to clip them on, do all of that. But look, Director, if you could invite some feedback.
Yeah, so we can send an email out and look at the ones that are too high.
I need guidance as well. Does the chain go at their back or at their front?
In the front.
So those
legs
holes,
don't go through the holes.
Those holes
Through
in
the
the
chair,
swing
not at
aren't
the back.
for their legs.
Front.
Could explain half your problems.
Hey, Matt, I reckon that you shouldn't be letting a babysit.
I put him in the other way with his legs through the holes.
So
Mind blown.
It's all right, you've got a spare now.
So, sorry, just through the chair, it is important to note, though, we do have around 617 playgrounds throughout the city, and the swings do accommodate all ages as well. So it's not just small children and toddlers. It's older people as well that enjoy having a swing. But certainly those swings that you have in question, we're happy to look at those and measure the height. But the soft fall really is problematic because it constantly changes. But that's why we've got a pretty high level of service in regards to how we maintain that soft fall.
Thank you.
What age can you? No.
Come on, enough. Councillors, happy to declare meeting closed at 10:09. Thank you.